Hello class, during this semester we are going to look at managerial communication and how it affects people's ability to get things done within an organization. Basically, anyone who is a manager managing one person or thousands of people, they need to be able to communicate in such a way as to be very clear. The learning objectives for this particular chapter have to do with management and communication, and how those two disciplines came together to form managerial communication. We'll also talk about managers and how they motivate, and why you need some policies for communication within the firm, and then how all of this changes when you have groups and teams, and how groups and teams use communication. Most job position announcements now have a communication component. They always ask for people who can communicate, who can get their message across. Are you a good communicator? It's one of the things you will see in almost every position announcement. They want both written and spoken communication abilities. Basically, you're going to have a lot of information that comes across your desk. And this is because of technology. You now have to sift through lots of information, and you have to be able to do this very quickly. Many organizations are becoming paperless, which means everything is done through the computer. Management is the judicious use of a means to accomplish an end. We have different management scholars. Theory X was basically the theory that was people work, they don't have anything to really offer the firm. As a manager, you really can't trust them, and that basically they're only going to do what you force them to do. Theory Y of management was the beginning, and both of these, by the way, were by McGregor, was the idea that, yes, people work for money, but they also want to enjoy their job. And they do have things to offer. They can offer better ways of doing processes if it's a manufacturing plant. They can offer better ways of doing your finances if they're in the financial department. They are helpful to the people that run the firm. And then Theory Z was by Deming, and it was basically made popular by Ochi. So you may have heard of either of these names. But Theory Z was the idea that everybody works together in a quality circle, meaning you didn't necessarily follow an organization chart, that you were able to go to whoever you needed to go to if you had a question. He couldn't sell the theory here in the United States. This was at the end of World War II. So he took it to Japan. And Sony Corporation was one of the first corporations to fully embrace this theory. A little aside in that, the reason Ochi was able to bring it back to the United States is his wife was the niece of the CEO of Sony. So he was able to get into that corporation and learn about the theory and how it was actually being used, and he wrote up his dissertation in this area, and then became basically the person who brought Theory Z back to the United States. This was in the late 70s. So it was in the 70s that we started working more in groups in companies in the United States. And you will still find all three types of management out there. Unfortunately, Theory X is still alive and well. You will find most companies, however, are more Theory Y or Theory Z oriented. Drucker was the first to actually name communication, managerial communication as such, and this was back in the 1950s. The National Communication Association defines communication as a group of instructional programs that focus on how messages and various media are produced, used, and interpreted within and across different contexts, channels, and cultures, and that prepare individuals to apply communication knowledge and skills professionally. We are going to talk about these different parts of communication throughout this course. Each one is very important, and it's important as a manager that you become skilled in each of these areas. Now, managerial communication is the blend of these two. So it's the study of the theories in management and communication that work together at all levels of the organization to inform, persuade, or entertain. It allows for relationship management, including management conflict, allowing others to express different views, and how to effectively assert oneself. Managers play many different roles. At times, they're simply analyzing situations, exchanging information. There's conversational management, relationship building. There's group management where you're working within groups to get things accomplished for the firm. But management is constant. And if you're going to be a good manager, you always have to be on top of your game. A manager has many roles. At times they have to be a mind reader, trying to figure out what their workers are thinking. Are they happy? Are they sad? Is there something going on in their home life? Are they sick? Are they well? Is there something about their job or people they work with they don't like? Are people not working together well? So they're detective, they're analysts, they're pundits, and they're fortune tellers. Because one of the things they have to do is figure out how to motivate people for the future of the corporation. Managerial communication should be two-way. They should be getting as much information from the people they manage as they are giving. And if you are a good manager, people will feel comfortable to come to you with both good and bad news. And we will talk about some consequences of people not feeling comfortable about that later in the course. But it is very important that people don't feel that the messenger is going to be killed. The message needs to be understood, which means you may have to explain it in multiple ways to reach all of the people who work for you. And it needs to achieve your intent. If it's that you want somebody to write a report, if you want them to give information to other people, whatever your intent is, it is the completion of that that says you sent a good message. And then the last thing is, you have to have goodwill on both sides. You can order people to do things, but generally, if you continue to order them and you never ask for their input, or you just dismiss their input, eventually probably those people are not going to like you. And it's going to become harder and harder for you to motivate the people that work for you. It's one of the most important functions of executive. Because if you can be brilliant, but if you cannot get your message across, then it's wasted. It's only through communication that we are able to complete tasks. It's how you assure that information flows, is by communicating with all of the people at all levels within your firm. And it's an imperative to achieving the mission of any company. You must get your ideas across. You must get people to do the work you want them to do if a company is going to grow. A wonderful example of this currently is Apple. When Jobs died, it was just a matter of time before the stock price started to fall. This is now the third time Jobs has left that company. The other two times, this same thing happened. Jobs was the glue. He was fired from his own company twice, but they hired him back because he was the creative force within that company. And they have not done anything at this point, it seems, to train anyone to replace him. And that's very important in an organization. When you have good people, one of the things you need to do as a manager is always be training other people to take their place. There are 4 types of workplace communication: organizational communication, business communication, corporate communication, and managerial communication. Basically, it wasn't until the 1880s and early 90s that communication theorists actually started looking at these as different forms of communication, because each one plays a different part in the firm. Organizational communication is the study of how, in a complex, system-oriented environment, people send and receive information that affects the organizational structure. And it's very important because every organization has its own culture. And there are correct ways to send and receive information. In some firms, you have to go by the organization chart. In other firms, you have more of a Theory Z situation where you can go to whomever you need. Some organizations are very group-oriented. Some organizations are very subject-oriented, such as engineering or finance or marketing departments. They are in silos. Business communication is basically focuses on the basics of written and oral communication. Most people who have been a business undergraduate have had a basic business communication course. If you are an MBA student and you feel you are lacking in some of these written or oral communication skills, you probably should go back and take an undergraduate course, because it is assumed at this level that you already have that knowledge. Corporate communication is basically the communication that goes out to the world. It's what builds the reputation and the image of the organization. So there's a lot of public relations that goes into corporate communications. And then managerial communications is what goes on between the people in the firm, between the management and all of the workers. It's the planning, leading, organizing, and controlling of the organization between all of the levels, between the top level, the middle level, and the people who are on the front line. And all of these need to be done very well, all four of these communications. If you look in the book at figure 1-1, it gives you an idea of how the communications overlap. Managerial communication basically has within it business communication, organizational communication, corporate communication, and management. Because managerial communication is this blend of management and communication. You have to have good business communication skills. You have to know what's going on with the corporation outside. You have to know how to communicate within your organization's communication structure, and you have to know how to manage. Next, let's look at the four functions, managerial functions of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Basically, planning sets up a blueprint for the future. And this is decided differently in many different organizations. But generally, you're going to have people who are either looking at their discipline areas or they're looking at where the company's going in the future. Generally, companies have niches in markets, and they'll kind of stay in those, but sometimes they'll completely change. GE, IBM are examples of two companies who have completely changed their blueprint for their future. Organizing, you determine who will do what and why. And it's important that everybody understands what their position is within the firm and what is expected of that position. Because if someone does not understand, they could skip things and things could not get done that need to be done. Leading occurs when top managers share their vision of the future and then shape the organizational culture to achieve that vision. Leadership is very unique, and everyone is not cut out to be a leader. Some people can be worker bees and do that very, very well, but can't lead. It's important to have the correct people in these positions to lead. And then controlling is the fourth part, and it systematically gauges the organization's actual performance against the established plans and goals, and guides adjustments in the area of weakness. Basically, you've got to be able to go back and look at your plan, see what was successful, what failed, and make corrections as you go ahead. It takes a lot of coordination. It takes people working together. There are positive means to motivate people, and there are negative means to motivate people. The research to date shows that positive motivation generally is better accepted and maintains that goodwill at the end of the day that is so important, rather than negative motivation. Most people resent being related to negatively because most people do or want to do a good job for the organization. The way you motivate people is very different depending on who they are. How you would motivate a football player or how you would motivate a lawyer in a company would be very different. But generally, we do know that the positive works better than the negative. When you are training people, one of the things you want them to understand is how the organization wants itself to be perceived, what that corporate culture is that people are seeing on the outside. So how they treat people is going to be very important. Basically, the people in top management are the ones that are going to be making the overall plans. If that does not get communicated down to the front line, how are they going to know what is expected of them and what they should be doing? This is where having job descriptions and having evaluations is so important, because it helps those people improve the skills they need on the front line. Middle management is generally the one who takes the overall plans of top management and breaks them down and distributes them to the correct areas in the company that need to know that information in order to do the job that the top executives have decided is the goal of the company. It's not necessarily an easy thing to get from the top to the bottom. If you were to do an experiment in a room and start a statement, just a simple two-sentence statement, with one person whispering it to the next person all the way around a table, by the time it gets back to that first person, it will not be exactly what was communicated the first time around. It will be similar, maybe, or it might be entirely different, depending on how people change the words as they translate what they heard. People do not always hear the same thing. So it's not always an easy thing. It looks like it's easy on paper to get an idea from the top to the bottom, or to get information from the bottom back up to the top. But that is not always true. It sometimes can be very difficult. As we said before, managers play many different roles within a firm. They have to be very competent in communication, planning, administration, teamwork, strategic action, global awareness, and self-management. The self-management can be as important as anything else. They also have to be connected in two areas within the organization, and that's both the informal and the formal areas of communication. The formal being the ones that go up and down the organization chart, the informal being the grapevine type of communication. There is an awful lot you have to stay on top of, and it takes a lot of time. And for some people, this is easier to do than it is for others. And part of it is because of this abundance of information. One of the first things you want to do when you get a position is go through all the information that's coming your way, and very slowly make sure you're getting the information you need, get rid of information that's coming to you that you don't need, and then figure out how best to take that information and translate it for the people you are managing, to make sure everybody is able to do their job and do it well. Communication policies are sometimes written down, and sometimes they're what we would call drawer policies, because they only exist in people's minds and as people interpret them. It is good when organizations have policies that are in writing or have them on an online site somehow, but people have to use them. And my experience is many times people will not take the time to actually look these policies up when they should. Organizations use communications differently, and no two organizations are exactly alike. Organizations have cultures, and they and they have climates. Some of these climates can be very supportive, others are very defensive in nature. And it starts at the top. My husband and I go to a doctor here in town. And one of the things we have always been amazed at is how friendly and helpful everyone is in this doctor's office. And then we started realizing it starts at the top. That's the doctor's personality. And it just becomes infectious for everyone who works for him. So basically, you've got to have good communication climate and a good organizational support at the top so that people feel free to then give your customers what they need and to listen and to be friendly and good-natured and also have the information they need. Data mining programs such as JAMS that IBM used are very good for large organizations because they allow people who sometimes might feel that they're taken for granted or nobody knows what they're doing or cares what they're doing to share that and to come up with better ways of doing things. This was particularly important for IBM because IBM completely remade themselves. They were strictly a hardware company. It was interesting because early on, even their typewriter repairmen were in gray suits and white shirts and conservative ties. Everyone dressed the same. It was also a very male-oriented company. It took a long time for that to change. It's one of the things when you're looking at Hofstadter's information that you need to realize. His study was done in IBM at a time when it was a very male-dominated company as far as management was concerned. Most of the females that worked in that company were secretaries or such. They didn't have a lot of females in management. Privacy statements are something that's forced by government. If you go to a doctor's office or a hospital, it seems like you get half a ream of paper of stuff of what they're going to do with all your information. And they're required by law to give you all of this stuff. Also, these policies may be formally written down, as I said, in policy journals, or they may be informal. And it's something you just learn as you work at the organization, which makes it difficult. Also, the media is very important because it'll have an awful lot to do with corporate communication and how the company is viewed on the outside. So learning who can talk with the media and who isn't to talk with the media and who you should refer people to when the media calls in is very important. Because one of the things you want is for your corporate communications to be very succinct and to basically have a pattern. You wouldn't want people in the organization giving out opinions that may not, in fact, be in agreement with the plan and overall organization of the firm. Group and team communication is a particular type of communication in the firm. It's a team approach. It uses that team approach theories that Demings and Ochi utilized, started in the 70s. It's more informal communications, and generally the idea is to bring a group of people together to solve a problem. And you put people with the necessary skills that that problem needs together. One of the things it does is it breaks down the silos between the groups in an organization and generally gives you more power, more problem-solving power to solve a particular situation. This is very good when you're starting a new product line, building a new production line, to bring lots of people together for different ideas. It also distributes the leadership across many different areas of the organization, which is also very positive. It gets people out of their silos so they meet each other. I often say at school, I'm in the College of Business. I know what's going on in the College of Business, but I have to be on service committees and meet other people in the university to have any idea what's going on in the other silos. You know, I don't really know that much about what goes on in liberal arts or what goes on in the law school if I wasn't on these committees. It also gives you an ability to empathize with other coworkers in other areas of the firm that maybe are not thought of as well or considered as important as they probably should be. It helps deal with the barriers that develop around engineering or marketing or finance or all the different given areas of a firm. And one of the things you need in these groups is very effective communication skills. You don't want somebody to take over. You want somebody who can give information that they have in a good way, and you want people to work together. And that's not always real easy. Some of the things that make teams particularly effective is if you have people with emotional intelligence, people who are empathetic, people who want to be on this group, who want to solve the problem. One of the things you don't need is somebody who's on the group and says, this can't be solved, this is a waste of time. Those people should be taken off the group because they're basically not going to help the situation. Teams, in general, have two things they need to do. They've got to complete the task, but they've also got to maintain good morale within the group. They've got to develop a trust within the group. And if this happens well, there's a synergy that develops that may make this group very unique within the organization and its ability to help. Some problems groups and teams have is groupthink. If you get to the point as a group that you all think alike, this is not positive. There needs to be a certain amount of devil's advocacy or dialectic inquiry that goes on in groups, because it's through these different ways of looking at possible solutions that a group will come up with hopefully the realm of possible solutions, and then we'll be able to home in on the one that is the correct solution to the problem. That's very important. Another problem with groups is time. You have monochronic people and you have polychronic people. And these people do not always necessarily work alike. And the polychronic will be able to deal with multiple issues at once, whereas monochronic people will like to work with one issue at a time. There is no right or wrong. This is something that we learn as we grow up in a culture. Virtual teams take this to another level, because when you have virtual teams, then you're getting into the multi-cultures in the world and all of the differences they have. And that's when it's very important to have emotionally intelligent people and culturally intelligent people who can home in empathetically on what is being said. One of the things you always run into with these virtual groups is they tend to work in English, because English is the international language of business. But for most of those people, that is not going to be a first language. And that means the people who are speaking English as a first language need to think carefully about what they are saying and how they are saying it. It's not an easy thing to do. But in today's world, where you have so many companies that have locations around the world, this is something most of you will be doing. And I would dare say, probably 80% of the companies, you would be working virtually. And even if you have a government job, you will probably be working virtually due to companies that are coming in to the United States, your state, your city, who are from other cultures. So this is something that's very important to be able to learn and to work with.